on the earlier discussion about reducing prison time, but especially focusing on the challenge of re-entry, which is a very separate policy challenge, how you successfully reintegrate people. And I'm struck by the parallel challenge of reintegration of deportees. I work on immigration issues I'll be speaking about later. This is a real challenge, especially for child deportees who have grown up, most of their lives in the U.S. and are sent back to Mexico and Central America, may not speak the language, have a hard time getting reintegrated in schools. But then there's a particular problem also with the deportation of criminals back to Mexico and Central America. The U.S. has deported 250,000 convicted criminals to Central America in the last 2 decades, and 1.5 million convicted criminals to Mexico. Those numbers overstate because that counts repeat customers. So the real number is maybe about half that, but that's still a huge influx of U.S. criminals who are deported back to Central America and Mexico with no reintegration strategy and no policies in place to put them on a path other than returning to crime and possibly returning to unauthorized immigration to the U.S. So just to flag that there's a lot of connections between immigration enforcement and crime, and this is a really important one, and in particular thinking about successful reintegration of deportees and criminal deportees.
Just if I could make just an observation. So most of my scholarly work 10 years ago was on the issue of reentry. It's a way of thinking about social inclusion. And what's striking about that is, of course, there are the difficulties of dealing with a disfavored population, a stigmatized population. But there are also a lot of policy choices that are quite clearly in the policy domain, such as what sorts of jobs are people eligible for or excluded from? How do we support the successful return home in terms of healthcare and housing and family reintegration? So there's a policy agenda that a number of states in the U.S. have recently adopted to promote successful reintegration for people coming out of prison. And we can talk about the research on that at another time. But you're absolutely right, there's an overlap, a conceptual overlap between deportation and immigration issues and incarceration, because in the U.S. we incarcerate those individuals before we deport them. So it's a prison issue, it's a jail issue, it's a detention center issue. But it's also conceptually very closely aligned set of policy questions about the successful reintegration. It is also a foreign policy question because it's a U.S. policy that you just alluded to of taking individuals and sending them back home, and the home may be a place they left when they were 3 years old, and they may have no family, and they may be returning to very inhospitable environments. So it's also an intergovernmental question of the first order. We have a number of scholars at John Jay who done work in Latin America in terms of deportation policy, and it's remarkable how difficult it is to get this on the agenda in the U.S. So I think the voice from Latin America and the Caribbean could help us put that on a U.S. policy agenda.
Un dato importantísimo de Mr. John Perry, que me parece que tiene un valor para nosotros. Dijo al pasar que una temática dura como es la temática social y la temática carcelaria como otras, los políticos del mundo en general no se quieren ni acercar y que no se van a acercar. Y a mí me parece que este encuentro, que a mí me conmueve, tiene que ver con un reencuentro, tiene que ver con el encuentro. La comunidad, la empresa, lo social, la política. Pero ese punto que me parece que tal vez nos preocupe a todos es ¿por qué razón, cuando hay un tema áspero, duro, complejo, pero que tiene que ver con los más postergados, pareciera que la política se aparta o le teme? Ese punto en particular que él dijo, me parece que hay que rescatarlo. Y también dijo que tuvo algunas felices coincidencias de la izquierda y la derecha americana, de manera que él también admirablemente trabajó esa unión en nombre de los más postergados. Y a mí me parece que es el segundo punto que dijo al pasar, que el estar acá significa cómo nos encontramos nosotros, comunidad, empresa, política, en nombre de los más postergados. Esas dos cosas que dijo al pasar, y en un idioma que no es el mío, yo las quería detener, ni siquiera para hablar hoy, pero sí a futuro, porque cómo vamos a trabajar un verdadero encuentro global donde esté solo la comunidad o solo la política. Ese punto es clave, me parece que a futuro hay que trabajarlo.